Namaskar and welcome to Sansad Television. I am Vishal Dahiya and you're watching our show Perspective, where we bring you detailed analysis of key national and international issues. Today we're going to talk about the defense budget and more specifically as to what is being said and talked about vis-a-vis the self-reliance in the defense sector and how this budget propels us further on that particular path. So Ministry of Defence has been allocated a total budget of approximately 5.25 lakh crore rupees for the financial year 2022-23 with a focus on modernization of defence services and defence security infrastructure development, including the border road infrastructure and coastal security infrastructure. The total allocation under capital outlay of the defence services has been increased from 86,740 crore rupees in 2013-14 to 1.52 lakh crore rupees in 2022-23. Now, 68% of the capital procurement budget will be earmarked for the domestic industry in 2022-23. That is up from 58% in the previous year, indicating government's commitment to reducing imports and promoting Atmanirbharta or self-reliant in equipment for the armed forces. While defence R&D will be opened up for industry, startups and academia, private industry will also be encouraged to take up design and development of military platforms and equipment in collaboration with DRDO and other organizations through SPV model. We'll discuss and analyze as to how will this budgetary allocation lead to India becoming self-reliant in defence sector and what more needs to be done here. And for more on this, we're joined by a very distinguished panel today. Let me first introduce them to you, beginning with Mr. Sunil K. Misra, who's joining us here in the studios, Director General of the Society of Indian Defence Manufacturers, that is SIDM. Welcome, Mr. Misra, to Sansad TV. We're also joined by two more guests. Retired Major General Dhruv C. Katoch is joining us, Director, India Foundation. And we also have Mr. Sachin Agarwal with us, the CMD of PTC Industries. Welcome, both of you gentlemen as well. Let me begin straight away by asking the simple but direct question here, Mr. Misra, as to not only how this budget redefines or defines the path for self-reliance in defense sector, but also vis-a-vis the numbers which we are looking at, from 58 to 68% in terms of the money being spent on Indian domestic defense manufacturers and the overall capital outlay there.
Well, self-reliance in defense is critical for any country. If our borders are safe and our defense forces are equipped with indigenous equipment, which is owned by us, the IP is in the country, we are assured of that the weapons will be available, the bullets will be available, the missiles will be available when we need them. Second is, with our own money, we should be creating jobs in the country and not funding the jobs outside. So these are two important things because of which Atmanirbharta in defense manufacturing is key.
Okay.
Now 68% allocation and rest of the things which the Honorable Union Finance Minister has allocated for the defense outlay are all done keeping in mind Atmanirbharta in focus. 68% of the defense procurement from the domestic industry would mean more funds for private industry, more funds for startups, which have recently got the fillip because of the policies which have been framed by the Government of India in the recent past.
Okay.
We have been making that endeavor since 1999-2000. But in the last 6-7 years, we have seen very good policies being made and a good ground has been created for private industry to also come up.
Okay.
We have had a very vibrant, very strong public sector for many years. They have delivered. But now the innovativeness, the entrepreneurial ability of the private sector, the ability to go out and take risk will be unleashed by this budget and the intentions which have been there.
Okay, that's a a very apt introduction when we are looking at why of this focus is required. Let's also start understanding how will it be done. And I'd like to start with General Katoch here. General Katoch, Obviously, I would like you to add on to the whys as well, but how will this happen? There is money, there is private sector, which is more than willing to go ahead and pitch in now. There are processes and policies which are being put in place. But what exactly is required to be done by both partners here, the private sector and the government?
Thank you, Vishal. I think Mr. Misra has already laid a very firm base as to where we should go ahead. But coming down to the specifics, you see, one of the problems which I have been seeing, which was faced in the defense sector per se, was that there were three players. We had the I beg your pardon. We had the manufacturers, we had the users, and then we had the administrators. That means the politicians and the bureaucrats who were managing it, the managing aspect. And for whatever reason it was, I don't want to get into that, there was never synergy built up between the three. Now we are seeing over the last 5 to 7 years, I will say, we are seeing that synergy being built up by all three. But I think much more can be done in building up this particular synergy. I would like to take the example of the Mittelstand brand, what they did in Germany, where the bureaucracy and the politicians actually came together to help the industry to grow.
Okay.
Now they became the enablers. Now we haven't reached that stage yet. But once we reach that stage, I'm quite confident that our defense sector will grow in unimaginable ways. Now, what has really happened is, the two industrial bases which are going to come up, industrial zones, one in UP and one in Tamil Nadu. I think this is a very important step because we had no defense infrastructure outside the public sector. And it was very difficult for a private player to come in, basically because investments are very high. And there is no guarantee that after putting in a huge amounts of money, whether the products will be taken by the users. The users are very limited. But I think now all that is history. There is the policies which are coming into effect is going to give the private sector a level playing field.
Okay.
For the public sector, I don't think the public sector has the capacity to manufacture 100% of the requirement of defense. Even with the help of the private sector, it will not be possible. It will take many, many years. So we require very strong public and private sector partnership. And the private sector really has to go about it in a big way. And for the private sector to go in a big way, it is enabling legislation is required. I think, both the political authority and the bureaucracy, the army and the civil bureaucracy, which is looking into it, they've got to see that this production really takes off. And once that happens, I think we will be on very strong ground. One. The second thing I think is and I'm very glad about this particular policy of the government, is the emphasis on exports.
Indeed.
Now, it is only because we are going in for exports that the quantum of scales which we are thinking of will come in. And that is going to give a boost to the private sector. And the last thing is the emphasis on research. Now, we cannot continue to be with screwdriver technology. We have seen the example of the BrahMos missile. And if you have the IP, what you can do with it.
Indeed.
And now we have the technology. We are going in for exports. So when this particular combination, I think, is going to be vital for the growth of the sector.
Okay.
So I think, in my personal view, I think the future as far as the defense industry is very bright. And we need to be very consistent with these policies, and we need to strengthen them further so that the private sector is enabled by India's bureaucracy and the political leadership.
Okay,
Vishal.
Indeed, that seems to be a very, rosy scenario from here onwards in terms of, the brain is with us. We have the wherewithal in terms of looking at things, understanding the technology, making it work. The entrepreneurship skills are also there. And so are the finances as far as the budget allocation for defense sector is concerned. Let's understand from Mr. Agarwal here as well. Mr. Sachin Agarwal, when we look at private industry, the question is, what is private industry looking forward to? Because the government is opening up space vis-a-vis research and development, design, as well as various other aspects. It's not just about money. It's about giving that equal space to the private sector. So what is the private sector looking forward to?
Thank you, Vishal. Again, as you as well as the previous speakers said, this is, to my mind, one of the most revolutionary budgets since a very long time, and especially focused also related to defense. I think that as a general statement, I think that the industries related to defense manufacturing in India is very, very excited about this budget. Not just the 68% increase or 68% of capital budget being allocated to the domestic purchases, which actually is an increase of approximately 16 to 17,000 crore rupees additional on top of what it was in the previous budget. But also this 25% allocation to the research and development being done in collaboration with DRDOs and other such organizations. Mm-hmm. This is actually moving. I think what this budget is doing is we can't just look at this budget in isolation as what happened just a few days back. This is basically a trendsetter. This is giving a direction to the country as to what will happen and what is going to happen in this country going forward. What this 21% and looking at the other messages that have come out from the government in the past few months, looking at the Ordnance Factory Board's corporatization, breaking that up into 7 different companies. All these are messages as to how the government sees that manufacturing for the defense within the country will happen over the next 1 decade. Mm-hmm. 25%, it's a 25% collaboration with the industry, with the DRDO and other research, is again moving towards that American concept of DARPA. And I think all those are just trendsetters giving us messages that where this is moving. So it's a very exciting time for manufacturing for the manufacturing industry in the defense sector.
Okay. Now that's all about policies and procedures which are being put in place and finances as well. Let's talk about the requirements and the capabilities as well. And then before I come to you, Mr. Misra, let's first understand from General Katoch here requirements, because it's all about demand and supply as well, just like any other industry, General Katoch. What are the requirements when we are talking about our armed forces? Because that is where the first focus of the private industry will be. And then, of course, the economy of scale will come into effect. The export policies will then, propel it further. So what are the requirements when we are looking at, either the big platforms, big purchases, or, small items there as well?
Vishal, I have always maintained that what we really require is reliable products. Reliability is the key. So if you get a reliable product from our own sources in time, now both of them are important. You want the latest technologies. It should be reliable and it should be timely. Mm-hmm. Now, if we have been promised this time and again by the public sector, but unfortunately, it never really turned out because the capacities, I think, were limited. And in my own view, unless the private sector comes into play, nothing is going to work. Mm-hmm. So let me take an example like the Tejas aircraft. Okay. Now, the Tejas is a 4th generation aircraft, a 4.5 generation aircraft fighter. Now, it may not be the best aircraft in the world. It doesn't matter. It is our aircraft. This is the one which we have made. We have got the IP for it. And once we develop it, then your aircraft industry will come up. Mm-hmm. Now, if we don't get into manufacturing at our own level, there is no way in which the ancillaries, the subsidiary industries, etc., can develop. Now, similarly for shipbuilding. So I think both in aircraft manufacture and in shipbuilding, we are looking at very, very exciting times, especially as Tata has also now entered into private manufacturing of private aircraft with Boeing. So all these things, I think, are related, and it really relates to policies of the government, where the government is saying, okay, we will enable you. The Prime Minister has made a very categorical statement, to export $5 billion worth of products by 2025. Mm-hmm. Now, it is these policies which give a boost. As far as the brain power is concerned, I have always maintained, India doesn't lack anywhere. We've got the best brains in the whole world. What we require is enabling policies. With those enabling policies, I think everything else will come.
Okay.
But we are looking at quality, reliability, and timeliness. And once you get that, then I think everything else is fine.
Okay, let me take that to both Mr. Misra and Mr. Agarwal as well. Mr. Misra, three aspects, as General Katoch is pointing out: quality, reliability, and of course, delivering on time. That is, sticking to the deadlines, the timelines as well, as far as the requirements of armed forces are concerned. Where does our capabilities stand? As in, by our, I mean the domestic manufacturing industry.
See, we have moved a long way since independence. Our manufacturing capabilities in 1940s and today in 2022 are a sea apart. Even our manufacturing capabilities, which were there pre-liberalization and post-liberalization, we have come a long way. The roads of this country are a witness to it. Today we have boxes plying on those roads which are equivalent to anywhere in the world, as good as anywhere in the world. Now, quality, as far as quality is concerned and timely delivery is concerned and the best practices are concerned, Indian industry, domestic industry is very well equipped to do that. The enabling infrastructure, the enabling policies for different kind of requirements. One is requirement of conventional equipment, and then there's a future where wars will be fought from the space. There will be unmanned vehicles on the ground, aerial, and on the sea. And the wars will be very different, which will be digitally controlled.
Indeed.
Now, for both these type of equipments, there are different policies which have been made for our requirements. So there is a indigenously designed, developed, and manufactured equipment policy. There's something called Make One, which addresses a different kind of need. So all these things are there. As far as General Katoch said, that the Indian cerebral asset is of the highest quality in the world. Augmenting that is the Indian entrepreneurial asset, which is perhaps also the best in the world. Because Indian entrepreneur, like Mr. Agarwal, they operate in very challenging situations, and they have been operating in challenging situations for the last 40, 50 years. So if the environment is right, the Indian cerebral asset coupled with the entrepreneurial prowess which we have, I am sure about it that we are moving in the right direction, and in times to come, we will be Atmanirbhar for sure.
Okay. So enabling environment is, of course, the key here. But Mr. Agarwal, when we're talking about capabilities, vis-a-vis both the technology and the manufacturing capabilities as well, because the industry will have to deliver to the demands or requirements of not only the Indian armed forces, but when that economy of scale comes into effect, the demands of exports as well.
Absolutely, Vishal. I think that's a very important aspect, and what Misra ji also said. This is a very important aspect, and as Misra ji said, Indian industry's capability today is a sea apart than what it was even a decade ago. The kind of technologies and capability as infrastructure that exists already in the country, in especially certain core manufacturing capabilities in metals, metallurgy, in electronics, is something to be seen and to be realized that what really is happening. I've taken a look at many of these such capabilities, and the only thing is to bring them within to give them a chance to contribute towards defense manufacturing. Already for the first time in the country, India has exported $400 billion in this year, past year. So that's happened for the first time, which is almost a 30% increase in Indian export. But the majority of that export has actually come from manufacturing this time, which is an amazing thing that has happened in this country. Now, so there's a lot of things happening geopolitically where where lot of, as you mentioned, export, lot of foreign buyers are wanting to resource and outsource and move their sourcing currently from China to other countries like India. And that also includes aerospace manufacturing as well. General Saab also mentioned about the Airbus deal that has happened. That's a 20,000 crore deal with Airbus and Tata that's getting it set up over here. There's almost 300 items that have gone onto this positive list or negative list, which cannot be imported. As I said earlier, capability, but one thing that you just said about the capability part, yes, that's very true. In order to invest in, to get into this, there's huge amount of investments required from the industry, because these technologies are not cheap. These are very, very capital intensive industries where certain long-term view needs to be taken as to where the orders are going to come from and how to make it economically viable. And for that reason, when such things come out, which says 68% of the purchasing has to happen from India, that gives the Indian industry confidence to go and invest furthermore, bring these capabilities and invest technologies within the country, capabilities within the country. And once the capability and infrastructure and equipment and technology, and as Misra ji said, the cerebral power, then the entrepreneurship of the country is all this mixed when goes in, which will transform this country over the next decade. I'm certain of it. Same thing as you have seen as to what happened with the car industry or auto component industry in the last two, 3 decades will happen now in the defense industry in the next couple of decades. And as General Saab said, instead of moving from this screwdriver technology to actually doing stuff, to actually making stuff, actually starting from core manufacturing over here, designing stuff, that's where we are heading towards now.
Indeed. And these are all capital-intensive technologies, as you're pointing out, and long-term view is required there. One quick question before we bring this to an end, Mr. Misra. As Mr. Agarwal was referring to, aviation manufacturing is one subsector where there seems to be a lot of action happening and a lot of action expected as well in the near future, almost 5 years to 10 years from here onwards. Apart from that, when we're talking about defense manufacturing sector and specifically domestic industry, what other subsectors we are looking at, promising ones?
Well, there's a lot of action happening on the naval front. Then there's a lot of action happening on the land systems. The enthusiasm of the industry I can feel because I travel, and I've traveled recently after the travels were opened up. I've met entrepreneurs in the UP Defense Corridor. I've met entrepreneurs in the Tamil Nadu Defense Corridor. I have been interacting with the state governments who are finding this as an emerging sector. And all of these, not only aviation, in aviation there's a different model because we have to collaborate and then go into it because these are very high technology areas. The whole spectrum of small industry, the startups, and the large industry, and the foreign OEMs, and our PSUs. There's a huge amount of enthusiasm because this is being viewed as an emerging sector where the environment has been created now, which is very conducive, and perhaps you look at any other sector of manufacturing industry, it has sort of plateaued out. This is one sector which is on the ascent as far as land systems are concerned or naval systems are concerned, and then it has a percolating effect. The larger industry will make larger systems, but it will give rise to the first tier, second tier, and the smaller suppliers. There will be a whole supply chain which will get evolved.
So there's a lot of action, expected out there and at various fronts. Thank you so much, Mr. Sunil Misra, Mr. Sachin Agarwal, and General Katoch as well for sharing your views and insight. As our experts were pointing out, quite a lot of focus has been put by the government as far as domestic defense manufacturing industry is concerned. And it's not just about finances or putting money in place, but also enabling policies and procedures which have been enacted and, of course, will be tweaked from time to time depending upon the needs and requirements. We'll keep a close watch on all the developments on this front and bring you all the details. Till then, keep watching Sansad Television. Thank you. Thank you.